CBS Sports HQ, good friend of ours, Barrett Sallee. Barrett, great to see you last weekend, my friend. Thanks for hopping on, dude. You're like the Hydra of CBS Sports HQ guys we've had on the last couple weeks.
Well, I'm glad a lot of our guys are coming on Training Company, and I'm very honored to be following an Aflac Duck reference. As a fan of all the Aflac SEC commercials, I really do appreciate it.
Without a doubt, and you don't duck nothing, Barrett. So let's start with the Deshaun Watson stuff. Your just overall thoughts on the 6-game suspension, because again, I'm trying to Doctor Strange, Rain Man, the numbers, like figure out how this makes sense. But again, I'm not Matt Damon from Good Will Hunting, so I just don't know.
Yeah, I tried to be Zach Galifianakis from the craps table, the blackjack table at in a Hangover. I don't understand it either. I think, you can compare it to a bunch of different things. And look, I'm not all about whataboutism. There are a bunch of different punishments that you could harken back to and say they're similar. And look, we don't know all the facts, but I mean, let's be honest. This is like the most egregious case of potential sexual violence we've seen at the NFL for a long time. But I think what you said, Jake, just a second ago is really important, because you can't connect the dots of the Browns giving him that contract with the fact that they didn't know this would happen.
100%.
If they thought he was going to be suspended for a year or a year and a half or 2 years, that contract makes no sense. And I would say it doesn't make any sense right now because he's rusty. And just from a pure football perspective, we don't know what he's going to be after that extended break. But for that to happen, and then he only gets suspended 6 games, it makes you scratch your head. And judging from my hairline, I've scratched mine quite a bit lately.
Well, again, mine's turning grayer by the second. I'm gonna end up being Gandalf here in about 6 months. But no, it does. It's tough to put the dots together, especially when you don't have all the information and you have one people saying it's this extreme, and then others saying, oh, well, they settled out of court. It's just a mess. There needs to be some consistency, like a good batch of biscuits. But Barrett, I do want to ask you, moving to the college game. Everybody's going to be talking about Alabama. We talked about Alabama when we saw you last week, and I'm going back through some of Saban's best teams. And when I look at this roster, and I know Latu, you hate it for him, Cameron, is going to be out probably till week 6, it's looking like, with a meniscus problem. But, Alabama, again, has a ton of talent. But when you look at this team, with what they return, with Bryce Young at the most important position on offense at quarterback, Will Anderson, the leader of that defense, could this be one of Nick Saban's best teams?
No, I don't think so, because it's not a complete team right now. And granted, that's a different bar than every other team in college football. But yes, they do have the 2 best players in college football, and I will die on the hill that Will Anderson was the best last year and is the best this year. But what have we seen from their offensive line to suggest it's going to be any different? I'm not the biggest spring game takeaway guy, but last spring, the offensive line was a disaster. In the fall, it was beyond a disaster. The current spring game, the one from April, it was a disaster as well. That's a trend. And it's a trend for a team in Alabama that's usually one of their strengths, if not the biggest strength of that team. So, I think from a talent perspective, from a potential perspective, it could be. I mean, look, you're talking about comparing $50 steaks to each other, right? Like, you're not going to go wrong with whatever one you order. But the fact that they have a glaring weakness that has been consistent over a year and a half, that part of the equation and that part of the answer does surprise me, because I just don't think that right now you can trust that offensive line, especially considering Evan Neal's gone.
Yeah, and Evan Neal was unreal. Blain, let's get to Booster Club Hot Ass. Barrett, a couple questions. I do think last year, that's what, to me, Barrett, made the SEC championship win for Alabama such a special performance, because that offensive line not only punched above their weight, but punched way above their weight against that front 7. I mean, Georgia stopped rushing about halfway through the third quarter. I mean, Dan was trying to go through everything to get them there. But when you look at some of the new hires, coming in from the offseason, you look at Billy, Brian Kelly, all these guys just around college football. What do you think up to this point, including Mario at Miami, what was the best offseason hire at head coach that you saw in college football this past offseason?
It's Lincoln Riley at USC. And think about this. Had we seen Brian Kelly go from Notre Dame to LSU in any other offseason, it would be like the college football world stopped spinning. But it came in an offseason where Lincoln Riley went to USC. So, we've seen LSU be great with Ed Orgeron as its head coach. That's not the hardest thing in the world to do. Florida really wasn't that much of a disaster under Ron Zook. Now, people like to joke about it, but he followed Steve Spurrier. I mean, what do you expect the guy to do? Be Steve Spurrier? That's a little unrealistic. But you're talking about now a program at USC that has been at the top, consistently been at the top, been a dynasty, and yet has been taken off the rails by Steve Sarkisian and then subsequently Clay Helton. I won't throw Lane Kiffin into that because he was dealt a really bad hand, and I think he gets unfairly criticized for what happened at USC. But now you have Lincoln Riley, a guy who knows how to market, a young guy in an NIL world where he can market his players to make a ton of money and recruit the hell out of Southern California. To me, USC within 2 years is going to be a Pac-12 champion, and I think in the college football playoff contention, maybe even this year if they can get by Utah, but I'm claiming Utah as my adopted team, so I have to kind of stick with that until they prove me wrong. But, I mean, USC at Lincoln Riley, they're going to win a national championship there.
Really? I feel that strongly about Mario and Miami. I think just from a natural, wholesome fit, Mario Cristobal, not just because he played there, not just because he understands it, just kind of his style in Miami. A little bit more that, Brian Kelly going to LSU, the accountability, the organization, the structure. Lincoln, if they get a defense, Barrett, I'll believe it with you. If they can get a defense.
Hell, they just need an offensive line. Honestly, need an offensive line.
But Barrett, they had an offensive line at Oklahoma. I mean, the problem for Oklahoma wasn't scoring points. I mean, even when they had Baker Mayfield and those guys running around, and then you look at Kyler and those guys running around, it's never been offensively. It's been that defensive step, which you know as well as I do, if they can keep some of those defensive linemen and offensive linemen from California to stay home, that's what Pete Carroll did. Because you know as well as I do, there's been a mass exodus from California to Florida, and it's not just because of Gavin Newsom. But go ahead, Coney.
Well, go ahead, Barrett.
Go ahead, Barrett. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, at Oklahoma, the defense did get better under Alex Grinch. The problem was Spencer Rattler happened at the same time. And so you kind of had the pendulum swing in the wrong direction enough to sort of prevent them from doing what they did before, and that's even contend in the Big 12.
Yeah.
Well, college football is certainly better when Miami and USC are both great. Sure. But I want to get your opinion on two marquee matchups, both on September 3rd. The Fighting Irish play the Buckeyes at the Horseshoe. Now, the Buckeyes are going to be lethal on offense, and I expect them to be better on defense this year than they were last season. But as for Notre Dame, I mean, clearly Marcus Freeman has brought a level of energy that wasn't there under Brian Kelly. What do you think the realistic expectation should be for Notre Dame fans on September 3rd when they go to the Horseshoe?
Honestly, I think it's just contention, being in the game midway through the fourth quarter, early in the fourth quarter. I mean, look, Marcus Freeman, the energy around that program, talking to some coaches around college football, the energy has been renewed. It didn't necessarily get stale under Brian Kelly. It just kind of got, repetitive, I guess, for lack of a better term. The way he's recruiting, the style he brings has really resonated well. But I think there's still, when you look at what Ohio State brings to the table, it's just, I think, the national championship favorite at this point. So, yeah, I mean, it is a great game. It's a great test for Marcus Freeman. But I agree with you, Connie, the defense is going to be solid. But when you're going up against Travion Henderson, CJ Stroud, a better offensive line, Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is the best wide receiver of a wide receiver room that is like 10 deep, I don't know how you stop that. And offense does drive the bus in college football, as you know, and it's only getting, more in that direction. So I just think if they're relevant, if they give Ohio State a test, if they can at least keep it competitive into the fourth quarter, that's a strong starting point. And think about this. That wouldn't eliminate them from the playoff either. No. A one loss to an Ohio State team, if you run the table, you're still sitting pretty, especially since you don't have one opportunity to lose on the first weekend in December. So I still think Notre Dame will be fine. I think the 10-win mark is where they should be. That should be the expectation every single year. And Ohio State's going to be a big test for Freeman. There's no doubt.
I agree, but I do think it'll be harder and harder for Notre Dame to find their way into the playoff with a loss if they're not going to join a conference. But I want to ask the same question for the Georgia-Oregon matchup. Dan Lanning goes from Georgia over to Oregon. They get transfer Auburn quarterback Bo Nix. Obviously, Georgia national champions last season, but they lost a lot due to the NFL draft. What do you think realistic expectations should be for Oregon fans in that game?
don't get blown out of the building. I mean, it's right now. I mean, the idea that Bo Nix is suddenly going to contend with Georgia and threaten a Georgia team at
He's
Oregon
focused.
when
he's having fun, Barrett.
Yes.
he's a Heisman dark horse. I mean, look, like Jake, y'all know. I mean, Auburn. I follow Auburn as much as you guys do. It's been around. It's been around my blood forever, for generations. Bo Nix was just okay with a talented team. When you're just okay with Tank freaking Bigsby, you've got issues. And at Oregon, I just don't see it. Dan Lanning, I think, will be a good coach. First game out, I don't see it. I think Georgia. It's interesting that people are sort of falling off the Georgia bandwagon because they just think that 5 defensive starters in the first round is something that Georgia can't overcome. Have you seen the classes that they put together? You just basically clone the same guy.
That's exactly
and if
right.
people don't think, if Jalen Carter, I'd say, was just as good as Jordan Davis last year in the middle of that defensive line. Nolan Smith, I know Nakobe Dean was great. Nolan Smith was no slouch either, and the secondary is just fine. You know, Keely Ringo, for being the guy that had the pick 6 to ice the national championship game, you know, he actually has done more than that. Like, he did appear in other games, and he also played like a first-round pick in those games. So I just think for Oregon to hang in that game would be a minor miracle. And look, you guys know this about me. Stetson Bennett does not get any credit. Like, it's like this narrative is stuck in Stetson Bennett that he's this. It's like, dude, he's not a walk-on anymore. He actually has a scholarship. Him finishing 3rd in the nation in yards per attempt is something that actually did happen last year.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, he's got a natty. I mean, I just don't understand the criticism.
Yeah, he brought his team back on basically a game-winning drive in the 4th quarter, you know, when you had to have it. People don't realize the dude,
good enough.
Not good enough. The dude didn't take
enough.
snaps in the offseason last year. They're like, well, Stetson, you know, like he wasn't even taking snaps, and he leads them to the natty. I was on a Georgia show earlier today with our buddy, the DGD podcast over there, and I'm just like, dude, like, y'all realize Stetson Bennett's going to be the greatest Georgia quarterback of all time when he leaves? Not Matt Stafford, not Aaron Murray, not any of these guys. Look, it's the mailman. You don't know he's there until the mail slipped in the door and you lost.
Yeah, I love Stetson Bennett.
Yeah, okay.
Huge talent. Georgia's lucky to have him. But hey, let's talk a little Pac-12 talk, Barrett. All right, I don't think they've been there since 2016 in the playoffs, and that was Washington.
Ew.
Okay? Could you see a Pac-12 team ending the drought and making the playoffs?
Put him on the spot. We know who you're going with, Barrett.
Well, hey, you know what, Daniel Day-Lewis? I absolutely think they can. Like, look, here's the thing with the Pac-12. Everyone criticizes the Pac-12. Look, I get it. It a lot of times cannibalizes itself. I have adopted, if you listen to SiriusXM on College Sports Sunday, we went through our teams that we're adopting, and I have adopted the Utah Utes. They're my baby, and if they fail, I will completely abandon them like this segment didn't even exist. But when you can run the football like they can, yeah, right. Cam Rising is a legit star. But here's the thing with Utah, and really with any Pac-12 team, you have to worry about like margin for error, right? Mm-hmm. They go to Florida in week 1. San Diego State's a really good team that's probably going to win 10 games this year. They do that in week 3. Utah is a team that can probably suffer a Pac-12 loss and win the championship and get into the playoff. You know, I think we forget, like, teams like LSU and Georgia had the luxury of losing SEC championship games and still getting in. Those situations are the exception. They're not the rule. So if Utah has a good strength of schedule, wins the Pac-12, even with one Pac-12 loss, generally speaking, and I hate this, but it's reality, the committee is going to, give them the benefit of the doubt with a championship under their belt, even if it is a Pac-12 championship. But it's even still, is there a better coach team in the country outside of Utah? Okay, you can maybe say Wake Forest of non-Big Four teams.
Yeah.
Wake Forest, Utah. That's kind of where the list ends.
Yeah. Well, I've got them losing to Florida and then not losing a game until the postseason starts. I think Utah is really sneaky to watch. And if you're going to lose one, obviously it's out of conference. Losing early on the road to an SEC team, even though I know Florida's roster is down, isn't a bad look. But I do got to say, I kind of had something that hit me this morning. The Pac-12 commissioner during the media days Did he not kind of sound like the guy who's playing the violin on the Titanic as it sinks?
A little bit.
Like he knows he's not leaving. Like he's like, guys, listen, we're just gonna play music and this thing's gonna sink in the freezing water, but nobody panic or freak out. What's the Booster Club saying? Speaking of freaking out.
Okay, yeah, we got a question here from Jay Cheney. He really wants to know. He asked it 3 times. Barrett, let's be honest here. All right, I want you to reach deep down your soul. What do you think of the stash?
Dude, I mean, I like it. Generally speaking, like ironic mustaches, I'm not a favor of. Like I make fun of this dude in my gym all the time for having one, but I think you can pull it off. Like it's a good look on you. I'd say trim it up a little bit, get a little sloppy. Maybe it's just a 5 o'clock shadow. You know, I don't know, but no, I like it. It's all right.
Okay,
you can pull it off.
It's all right.
That's a good.
It's all right.
Dude, that's a win.
That's a win.
That's a win.
That's a win.
That's a solid win.
Take that and move on.
All right, Papa Link 90 hashtag ask Barrett. What Big Ten team outside of Ohio State has a shot at the playoff?
Here we go, Barrett.
Michigan.
Don't get this wrong.
Ohio State's second team. I mean, does that count?
How
I mean,
dare
there's
you.
some pretty good wide
Purdue?
receivers there.
Maybe little Purdue, maybe Michigan State sneaks up
No.
on somebody. Is there any other teams in the Big Ten?
There are a couple others.
Wisconsin. Graham Mertz
They
figured
can
it
run
out.
the football. They've got like a 10th year starting quarterback.
They do.
Who has just been okay. But okay for Wisconsin generally does play well at quarterbacks. And, you know, they're well coached defensively. So, and then the Big Ten West. I mean, I'm not buying Penn State. Sorry, Coney. I'm not buying Michigan. Michigan State, you know, whatever. Mel Tucker.
Just don't say
Goodyear. Let's see
Iowa.
you do it
Don't
again.
say Iowa.
No, I can't. I mean, Spencer Petras. I mean, you know, let's be the bar for Iowa quarterbacks is a little different, not much different, but a little different than Wisconsin. So I'm going to probably say the Badgers. Plus, I mean, like, look, if you're talking about getting to the college football playoff, I think you probably have to go somebody from the West because getting to Indy is like the most important part of that equation. Because 60 good minutes is possible. Anybody can beat anybody, even Ohio State. So I'd probably say the Badgers.
Okay. One more, Blaine.
All right, Jack Daughtry, he wants to know hashtag
Chris's
ask
brother?
Yeah, it might be a hashtag ask Crane & Co. He says, will Maryland ever be good at football again?
I mean, I'd like to say yes with certainty. I'm going to have to sort of question it like, yes, like I'm Ron Burgundy, or
about mustaches.
repeat the line, whichever, joke we're going with now. But I mean, I like Loxley. He can recruit. I think he can recruit well through the transfer portal. I think to win at Maryland, you basically have to own the DMV. And
for sure,
for Maryland to do that it's almost impossible right now. That is like a 6-7 year recruiting plan to establish yourself to a point where you don't lose DMV battles.
Yeah, the DMV is unbelievably rich in talent too. I mean, all the way up and down. But Barrett, we appreciate it, my friend. It's always great. Tell everybody where they can catch your fantastic content and work.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I appreciate it. CBSSports.com, CBS Sports HQ, streaming all day long on any single device, streaming TV device, whatever. And you can hear me and Tom Luganville doing stupid things on SiriusXM at plenty of times throughout the course of the season.
We love Lugs. I got to get him on the show here soon. But Barrett, I appreciate it, my friend. Chop on as usual.
Chop on. Later, boys.
If you like that content, go ahead and subscribe because we're going to be balling every day on Crane & Company. Hit that like button while you're at it and go ahead and smash it like Derrick Henry on an ISO run.